I guess as a first point of order, I would like to apologize to the community. So apparently, when you clicked on the invitation, a picture of myself as big as the screen appeared. I want to assure you, I had nothing to do with that.
You send a picture.
I was asked for a picture. That was my responsibility.
We just publish.
Yeah. Anyway, so tonight, I promise not to be very long. This will be 21 slides. And we're going to talk tonight about entrepreneur mafias and why they're important in growing a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. Okay? So there is a general consensus emerging globally that one of the most important tools of social and economic development and prosperity is entrepreneurship. And if you want any evidence of this, all you have to do is a Google search, which I did. So you type in the next Silicon Valley, and up comes 71 million results. That's almost double of Manny Pacquiao, right? On the eve of his fight. So you know that this is a big thing globally, right? And a lot of people are focused on entrepreneurship as the main weapon for economic development. So I am optimistic that in this room full of entrepreneurs, a bunch of you will create businesses that will drive the economic prosperity of this country. I am optimistic that a bunch of you will help to fulfill what HSBC said 2 years ago in one of the reports, that by the year 2050, the Philippines will be ranked number 16 or 17 globally in terms of GDP. And I am optimistic also that some of you will become what we call in Endeavor high-impact entrepreneurs. Right? And for us, high impact means two things. It means entrepreneurs that are able to scale their businesses so that they're big, they're valuable, and they create lots of jobs. But secondly, and to me the more interesting bit about high impact, is that they reinvest their success in other entrepreneurs by coaching them, by mentoring them, by being role models, and in many cases by actually investing in them. So why am I optimistic? Well, if you look at successful ecosystems around the world, whether it's Silicon Valley, which we'll talk about today, Tel Aviv, or London, you'll notice that really it only required a handful of entrepreneurs to get an ecosystem going. So today I'd like to share a few of those stories. Okay? And I think these are important stories because what we've seen is that these stories are replicated over and over and over again around the world. So our story will start with this man. Guys, you know who this is? This is a gentleman who in many ways started this whole Silicon Valley phenomenon. His name is William Shockley, an American. Was born in 1910, born in California, got a PhD at MIT in physics. At one point, he ended up at Bell Labs and invented or co-invented a transistor. For those of you that studied electrical engineering, that controls or amplifies electrical signals, right? And this invention was so good that it actually won him and his co-inventors a Nobel Prize. So he left Bell in 1955 to commercialize his invention. And of all the places to go and commercialize a Nobel Prize winning technology, he picked a place that was near and dear to him, right? He decided he would base his business near his ailing mother. And that place happened to be a place called Mountain View, California. Some of you might know Mountain View, California as the hometown of Google. Right? So at that time, population 6,500, a sleepy little farming town. This area, by the way, is now called, this area and surrounding areas are called Silicon Valley, right? Really because of Shockley's silicon transistors. So by any measure, this was a very surprising choice, right? To go all across the US to this little farming town to start his fancy new transistor business or his semiconductor business. Because if you look at this chart, by 1955, which was when he moved, there were already 21 semiconductor companies, or transistor companies. Most of them in the East Coast. Quite a few of them, sort of in the middle of the US, but largely nothing on the West Coast. And this place that he went to, the Bay Area, lacked the three things you needed to be successful: customers, employees, and capital. Right? Most of the customers were in the East Coast. Employees, well, the guys that were good, guess what? They were working in these cities. And in terms of capital, really, it was still a very East Coast driven VC community. There was nothing in California. So, would he be successful? What would happen to him? Well, because he won a Nobel Prize, he was actually successful in raising some capital from a New York financier, and he managed to get 8 young, not so experienced engineers to go and join him, right? These are the 8 guys. Average age, how old are you, David? 30. Okay, David's age, right? So not the most experienced engineers.
They look better though. And they look better.
No, David looks so much better than this guy. David is, he's my inspiration actually for fashion. So he gets these guys, right? He hires them. Now there's one problem. Have you guys seen the movie, The Imitation Game? Stephen Turing trying to break the Enigma code? Yeah. This guy was a nightmare to work for. This guy was brilliant, but he was a paranoid control freak, right? A paranoid control freak. So these guys, at one point, all decided, we're better off somewhere else. And over a period of about a year, they began to sort of think about what they would do next. So they decided that they would form their own semiconductor company, which is Fairchild Semiconductors. And Fairchild Semiconductors grew to be one of the most successful semiconductor companies in the world. Right? It took them about 10 years to become number 2 in the world. After only 3 years, I think they were doing $20 million of revenue. This is in 1958 dollars, right? That's quite a hefty sum for that time. Now, this was only the beginning of their achievements, right? Just because they had this fancy semiconductor company, which was number 2 in the world, that's not the end of the story. What happened next, actually, was one of the most extraordinary events, I think, in business history in the last 100 years. Okay, you want to know what happened? So the extraordinary thing was that after achieving financial success, all 8, over a period of a couple of years, left Fairchild. They left Fairchild to start other companies, right? They began to invest their credibility, their knowledge, and their capital in new companies and in other entrepreneurs. You might have heard of some of the things that came out of this so-called Fairchild Mafia, right? So one of the guys was a guy named Gordon Moore, the guy after whom Moore's Law was named, Moore's Law? So he and another Fairchild founder named Robert Noyce left in 1968 to found Intel. And today, of course, I think more than, I don't know what the number is, more than 80% of all computers on the face of this earth have an Intel microprocessor in them. Okay, who else came out of this mafia? Well, there was a guy named Eugene Kleiner, right? Not related to Calvin Kleiner. This is Eugene Kleiner. This is Eugene Kleiner of probably one of the most respected venture capital companies in the world, right? The granddaddy of all VCs. And what happened was interesting. They actually replaced NASA and the government, the US government, in the state of California, as the primary financing source. And it was because of Kleiner that today we enjoy searching on Google, we enjoy buying things on Amazon, we enjoy listening to music on Spotify, and we enjoy being able to go all the way to Baguio because of Waze, like Kleiner Perkins. Who else came out of this place? So it wasn't just founders, actually some of the senior executives also went out and started companies. So this guy on the right, his name is Mike Markula. He was a vice president of marketing at Fairchild. He worked for Intel for a while. made some money. Then he met two guys who had a partnership called Apple. These two guys needed some money, so he says, okay, let me cut a check for $250,000. I'm going to turn the partnership into an actual company, and I'm going to be CEO. So he was employee number 3 and the first CEO. Okay, so the Fairchild Mafia, an extraordinary story of wealth and job creation. Right? So by reinvesting their success in other entrepreneurs, they completely transformed this little town of 6,500 people and the surrounding areas. By 1970, so roughly 15 years, or maybe a dozen years after they started Fairchild, there were 31 spin-off companies that employed 12,000 people. Okay, so it took them about a dozen years to get to the stage. Now you fast forward to today and you see how staggering the impact of the Fairchild Mafia is. This is a map of 92 descendants of the Fairchild parents. These companies employ over 80,000 people. If you were to take the market, the combined market cap of these 92 companies, $2.1 trillion, which is larger than the GDP of India, larger than the GDP of Spain, larger than the GDP of Canada. Today, of the 130 Bay Area tech companies that are listed, whether it's NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, 70%, a full 70%, trace their origins back to Fairchild Semiconductor. Now, this is not the only mafia we talk about. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this mafia, right? This is the PayPal mafia. So the PayPal mafia happened after eBay bought PayPal, right? So now you have these freshly minted millionaires. You know, and what's a self-respecting millionaire to do with all their money? Well, it's to pay it forward, continue the adventure, reinvest your success, your credibility, your money in other interesting ventures. So we in Endeavor believe that people like this have a very different definition of success. Right? That success isn't just how much money you make. We believe that successful entrepreneurs measure the size of their influence. Right? That's the barometer of success. It's the size of their influence with specific reference to a growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the question might be, well, does this kind of stuff only happen on the west coast of the United States? What do you think? So we actually, we tested this theory, right? And we tested this theory in a place very far away from Silicon Valley. We went to Buenos Aires, Argentina, right? Which was the place where Endeavor first set up its office, right? In Argentina. So we said, let's figure out if this same dynamic happens, you know, in the south of South America. Today, as you may or may not know, Buenos Aires has a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem. I don't know if you're familiar with Buenos Aires, but it's a happening kind of place. And if you think about it, they shouldn't be successful, right? They shouldn't be, by any measure, right? Argentina, this is the place with runaway inflation. This is the place where every other week they're on the brink of debt default, right? This is a place which is ranked the third most corrupt country in South America, right? So what happened? How did this work? Okay, so let's go back to mafias, right? So we did a study, we did a survey of over 200 entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, and we asked them very simple questions. Who mentored you? Who was your inspiration? Who gave you your first capital? Where did your first few people come from? Right? And we tried to measure the connections. We tried to measure the outward influence. Right? So in this map, the size of the bubble equals the size of your influence in the ecosystem. So if you look at this, in 1996, these guys, first of all, there weren't that many, right? About 10 companies. And if you see from this, they pretty much had nothing to do with each other. So they didn't really know each other. There was no network to speak of. 3 years later, 1999, we're up to 26 companies. But still, there doesn't seem to be a clear leader in this ecosystem, right? But things get more interesting. By 2006, right? 61 companies, and you see a few companies that are beginning to be recognized as leaders in this ecosystem. One of them is OfficeNet, right, which is like a Staples for Argentina. The other one is Patagon. Patagon is a CitySec Online, so it's a financial trading platform for South America. Let's see what this thing looks like in 2011. Right, so by the time you get to 2011, right, this is not that far off from, what was the first time, 1996, right? By the time you get to 2011, we're looking at over 200 companies. And here you see about 4, 5, 6 very significant and very influential companies. Right? The interesting thing is, when you do the analysis, 80% of all these companies trace their origin to 4 companies. Right? It's Mercado Libre, which is the eBay of South America. It's Digital Ventures, it's Patagon, and it's OfficeNet. Right? Very similar dynamic to what we saw in Fairchild, what we saw with PayPal. So let me talk quickly about 2 of these companies, right? One of them is Patagon, which I said is like a CitySec Online. It was started by a 23-year-old who was a son of a sheep farmer. Right? By the year 2000 or 2001, this thing was so interesting that he sold a majority stake of this to Banco Santander, one of the largest Spanish banks. And this thing had a valuation of about $750 million. If you look at Mercado Libre, which was started by 3 guys, where's Mercado? Mercado Libre, 3 guys in their late 20s, kind of early 30s, right? This was the eBay of Latin America. When they first approached Endeavor in 1998, I think they were booking about $250,000, $300,000, something like that. Then they listed on NASDAQ in 2007. Market cap today is about $3.8 billion. Right? Revenues in 2013 were over $300 million. Right? So something interesting happened in Argentina. Very similar to what happened in some of these other places we looked at. So I just want, since this is close to the end of this presentation, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Endeavor. Right? So all of these companies in teal, this is official teal, Pantone color number 72, I think. all of these are Endeavor companies. Right? And you'll see that they form a major part of the ecosystem. And I think if you look at all the connections, they influence about 80% of this ecosystem. Right? So what is Endeavor all about? Why is Endeavor Endeavor? Well, our mission, right, as a nonprofit, our mission is to support high-impact entrepreneurs like Mercado Libre, like Patagon, so that they can generate wealth and they can generate jobs and therefore contribute to economic development. Right? So fundamentally, that's what we're about. Right? It's about helping companies scale up so that they can create economic development. Okay, so the next natural question might be, well, so how exactly do you support these entrepreneurs? So I like to look at Endeavor as a global network, right? And this is the network age, right? So it's a global network. And I think as of last count, we have 3,000 mentors, right? So 3,000 very smart, accomplished business people who all volunteer their time to help companies scale up. The other part of the network includes institutional partners like Bain, like Ernst & Young, like some of the top business schools, MIT, Harvard, Stanford. Again, we've all said, we're going to send volunteers to go and help you sort stuff out, right? And the kind of stuff that we help them sort out tends to fall into 3 areas. One is markets, right? How do we help you grow in your market? How do we help you grow in other markets? The second is talent. How do we help you find the right kind of talent, the right kind of advice for specific issues, the right kinds of people to solve your problems? And the last one is capital, right? So we have a network. Questions might be, well, how do I what's the right kind of capital that I need to raise? Because not all capital is the same. What's the right way to pitch my business? What's the right way to position my business? So that's what we do, right, for a living, is we connect entrepreneurs to this incredible global network, and we help them, with laser sharp focus, we help them scale up the business. Now, this is not a free ride, right? There's a quid pro quo. You don't just get all of this for nothing, right? I hope. So what do we expect? I think what we expect is very simple. It goes back to what high impact entrepreneurship is about, right? Is that you spend your blood, sweat, and tears scaling up your business, right? Making it relevant, making it big, meaningful, create jobs. And the second thing, which again I think is the more interesting element, is that you pay it forward. Just like the guys at Patagon and Mercado Libre who've invested in other companies, who now sit on the boards of Endeavor, either Endeavor Argentina, Endeavor Global, right? Or that you'll be like the guys from Fairchild or PayPal, right? The buck doesn't stop once you do your exit or once you do your trade sale. So here in the Philippines, we set up our office. This is the last slide. We set up our office about 4 months ago. For about 2.5 months, the people in my office were me, myself, and I. But I now have Endeavor person number 2. Her name is Joanna Weiss.
Welcome.
Can you listen up? And so our goal, right? Our goal is really to try to help create an entrepreneur mafia here in the Philippines, right? And my hope is that all of you guys will be part of this journey, right? That you will be part of this growing ecosystem. And to make it strong, just like in Buenos Aires, just like in Fairchild, just like in PayPal, to make this ecosystem strong, we will need to start with one thing, right? And that is to change our definition of success, like I said earlier, right? So I think the starting point of this is actually a mindset shift, right? I call it the, what do I call it? I call it the pay it forward multiplier effect, that we begin to think in this way, right? It's not just about us, it's about something much larger than us. And so let's not define success purely as financial gain, but rather as our ability to influence the growth of the ecosystem as mentors, as role models, as investors. So that's it. That's Endeavor. If you have any questions about it, Joanna and I will be very happy to talk to you. Thank you. Are we doing Q&A?
Yes.
Or no? Are we just drinking?
Absolutely here.
Okay.
We always do Q&A.
Okay, no personal questions, please. You guys have any questions?
Other questions from the floor? Aha.
Yes, please.
I always
Abby.
do that. You mentioned Argentina, and I think Brazil for that matter, but you mentioned Argentina. But if you take a step back from the start line that you chose, it goes back to a landed, it was a very feudal system in Argentina. It was a landed class that ultimately went into, and now that you're coming into the Philippines, and it kind of comes from a similar background.
Yeah.
Did you find the same in a lot of the markets that you went to, that if you take a step back from the companies, there was the banks or the funds that fund them, or the insurance companies that fueled the boom of the VC investments in the 80s. So do you think they also exert as much or even more of an influence on because we all live in a financial world, right? So
Is your question whether the financial institutions
are actually the most influential at any stage of mankind? I mean, any stage of...
Wow, this is becoming a very deep philosophical.
Far back as Fairchild.
Yeah. So do we go back all the way to the times of money lenders in the 12th century? The Medicis?
Okay, perhaps. But
Yeah.
it is what...
Yeah. Listen, point taken. I think we've seen a mix of people become successful entrepreneurs in all these emerging markets. Clearly, a lot of people have more advantages than others, right? People who are born in a particular, kind of family with access to this and that. But we've also seen, like, the son of the sheep farmer, others who have had no connections whatsoever. In fact, let me tell you a quick anecdote about how this all got started, right? So this was started by a woman named Linda Rodenberg. Linda graduated from Yale Law School, sort of during the first tech boom, right? This was the 1990s. She decided no way in hell was she going to be a lawyer, right? She found this tech thing more interesting, so she was going to look for opportunities outside of the U.S. Found herself in South America, specifically in Argentina. And she'd take these taxis all over the place. And she noticed one thing, right? She said, why is it that so many of these drivers are PhDs in some kind of, scientific field? And she talked to them. She's a chatty girl. She would talk to them. And one thing became very clear, right? The same thing kept happening. She'd say, what do you do? Well, I'm a PhD in this and that, but I'm driving a cab. Why? And then they'd say, well, what do you want me to do? Work for the government? And he'd say, well, that's not what I meant. I mean, look what's happening in California. All these smart science guys, like Eric Toma Cruz over there, they're building their own companies. And then they would say, well, who's going to take my call? Who's going to lend me money? Who's going to believe me? I'm a nobody. I live in a feudal society, right? Where the guys on the top, have all the cheese. And so she said, you know what? I think this is going to be my life's work. I'm going to create a support organization for people that don't have that access to capital, to connections, to networks. And so that's where we are today, right? And this has been going on since 1998. These network maps that I've shown you, we've done studies in Colombia, Istanbul, Amman, Jordan. It's the exact same pattern. Right? It's the exact same pattern. I think if you look at the provenance of all these entrepreneurs, it's from all over the map, right? Rich guys to poor guys, men, we need more women, but there's quite a few women as well. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I know about here, I don't know about
Yeah.
there, so I was just asking you something you thought I know.
All right.
Yeah.
There were other questions? Otherwise, we can pick on the people we know.
Yes, sir.
This is more than a question, it's an adjunct to what you just said. Well, I guess I'm one of the oldest guys here. No? I'm 69. 69 2 days ago. Well, anyway, I'm of that generation where we tried to set up and coerce government to set up a series of venture corporation where, because of our consultancy to the regime of Marcos, we were young dreamers then who were believed that we could save this country, not away from him, but maybe made it better. So we coerced all the banks by virtue of a presidential decree to have a venture corporation. And when I see you doing what you're trying to do now, how I wish you were there with us at that time. We had a venture corporation, but we had banks who only knew collateral. I had to fight a guy who's still around. He calls himself a venture corporation. He's now in trouble because 2 of his buildings that he'd been set up has been questioned now by a fund. But anyway, beyond personalities, what has happened is that we couldn't start with ventures because they told us, how can we sell dreams? How can we sell discounted cash flows? At that time, would you believe there were less than 500 people who believe in discounted cash flows, IRRs, and everything in this country. And now, my question is this. At this stage, when people like you and a whole bunch of young people, and what they say now is the new miracle of Asia, is it? I don't know. What can the old landed people and people like us who have seen, the true apologies to those who are the politicians, but I've served with politicians, who've been abused of their talents by politicians, what can we do to bridge the gap between the landed elite who are now getting true valuations of their land because of this this land press for development, how do we bring them now to the fold of people like you who are in need of capital? Because I don't believe there's really need of capital here. You've got rural banks here that are flowing with money to their ears, but they wouldn't lend less than 24% per annum. Maybe you young guys can come out with the creative ways on how we can coerce these rural bankers, all this money flow that is trying to let go only at 24, 36, or 34% with all of your ideas. I belong to that generation where we tried to create capital. We were lucky we were able to make Pag-ibig run. We were able to push for long-term funding. But now I see still a lot of people holding on to cash, not letting go. If it's less than 23, 16, or 18, ano ba? What's the solution?
Okay. The solution is Jerry Maguire. I don't know if you remember that movie. Show me the money, right? And sometimes all it takes is one guy to show that you can make a boatload of money, right? We've had that happen here. Last December, Nick Smollieto listed his company. He was oversubscribed I don't know how many times, right? And a lot of these guys were not people as young as David Margendorf over there. A lot of these guys were people who probably don't understand IRRs and DCFs, but what they do see is that there's WhatsApp out there valued at this, there's Facebook out there valued at this, and they like the story. Now, all of these investors have already made money, and I think money begets money, right? So I think we're at the start of an easier period when it comes to financing tech, right? Because we've had an exit. We've had validation that people can generate value for themselves as investors.
Good. Do you, I keep hearing you mention tech companies and, obviously your slide was mostly tech companies.
Right.
Do you guys ever venture into anything
Yes.
in that sector?
Yes. So Endeavor's global portfolio is probably about 30% tech. I think about 60% of it is very consumer focused. It's fashion, retail, restaurants, and the like. There's some manufacturing, some agriculture as well. Yes.
But for the Philippines, which industries are you looking into aside from tech?
So right now we're looking at everything. I do have some of my pet areas. I think Joanna has some of her pet areas. One of the areas I really would like to see more good entrepreneurs enter is agriculture. Because I think there's a huge mismatch between people employed in agriculture and how much value is being generated in agriculture. Yes, go ahead.
Miles.
Yeah, sorry, Miles.
Like what I mentioned at the Rappler conference earlier today, because investment in tech is pretty obvious for a lot of investors. But I'm wondering what about social good businesses that actually use tech to address they call it the pain point.
Yeah.
So would there be a chance for companies like maybe Endeavor or other investment companies to at least consider the business model for social good projects that actually can actually make a profit?
So quite a number of the companies in Endeavor have a social benefit, right? But I think the first screen is, does it make a return? Is it sustainable, right? So I think if it's a social business, that's a sexy story, but it doesn't make money, then it wouldn't be. Then it probably wouldn't make the 4-step filter that we have. Yeah, please.
Because right now, for example, my company, we're creating a brand, which is actually a mainstream brand. This is somewhere similar to maybe Starbucks or maybe Amazon or stuff like that. Because I come from an advertising marketing background, so I designed the company that way. But what we lack actually is the business acumen, the intelligence. So I think even before we get to the point of asking for investment, like what I mentioned to Minand, actually, what we're really interested in is actually education, or maybe experience working with companies like Endeavor, maybe even Kickstart, to gain that kind of experience and wisdom so that we can come up with a business model or a business plan where we become, we have value for investors.
I don't think I'm old enough to have wisdom. So what was it? When did we see Dylan? Is that Wednesday? Tuesday? What day is it today?
Today is Thursday, so Tuesday.
Tuesday. So Tuesday we actually paid a call on, do you guys know Dylan and Anna Wilk? Right, who run Human Nature. Right, so that's, this guy is an entrepreneur. He's a dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur who's now doing something that has a social dimension. So we love that, right, because we know that it's a great business. This guy runs a tight shop. So in addition to his own products, he's actually trying to help other social entrepreneurs, people who make coffee and tea and other products, right? But he's such a good entrepreneur that his standards are so high, right? He spends a lot of time working with them to say, okay, you have to do this, this, and this, and the only way you'll ever be distributed with me is if you hit all of these, right? And he spends the time doing that. So that's the kind of entrepreneur we like, right? He's good at business, and there's a really compelling social dimension as well to what he's doing. Yes, please.
Well, regarding Dylan, his greatest asset is that he's got a super good father-in-law, Tony Meloto. You all know who Tony Meloto is. But anyway, my question is this. As I said, I come from that generation of dreamers, venture capitalists, where for us to come out with a system that would work, we have the establishment boys on the left side. At that time, they were either Jobo Fernandez, Roberto Villanueva, Charlie Palanca, and the SGB group at the time. And you got the big funders at the side, who were the old hacienderos. Now, what I'm looking at is how do we, at this point, really, what are the necessary, what are the prerequisites for somebody who'd want to quantum leap this venturing in this country, seeing money being released from the landed capitalist, seeing that a great valuation of properties or wealth was created the past 20 years because of this massive growth away from Manila, the housing-led growth or prices made the haciendas for sale and everything. I mean, my question is basically, how do we now put this into something like a common service facility or a clearinghouse where venture dreamers, like a lot of people here, and the people with idle cash can have a clearinghouse and find out. It's hard to go to the bank if they tell you, I give you 10%, 11% convertible to something or whatever, or buy my equity. I mean, I guess for us to quantum leap the Philippines, we have to go beyond the old capitalistic system.
Over to you, Minette.
So, I'm going to jump in because there are a couple of things, and also to tell people we have time for one or two questions. So, I think, sir, quite a lot of your interest is getting the private sector to step up. And I think that is a good thing because, and I don't know how many people share this view, my view is the role of public sector, the role of government is to create a policy environment that makes it possible for everyone to be competitive. I think the funding is the role of the private sector. And when you talk about the private sector, there are various funds that are available. So obviously for many years, we have had the established venture capital firms. Companies like Nara Ventures, like ICCP of Sina Gili Luchanco and Billy Valtos. And they're there for the more mature things. 3 years ago, 3 funds announced, all private sector. There was Wireless Wings, the very first one. This is Myla Villanueva, for those of you who don't know her, serial entrepreneur. She brought in the first Apple distributorship. She runs Novare together with Craig Ehrlich and a few other people. Idea Space, we have Beth.
Hi, Beth.
So Beth is here from Idea Space. Idea Space is the First Pacific Group. And they announced a fund that includes both funding early stage, quite seed stage, idea stage companies, in fact, along with training, mentorship, support, legal services, accounting. Am I representing correctly?
You are representing.
Good, huh?
Yes, yes.
So quite a lot of support. And there was Kickstart, where you guys are, and if you don't know what we do, so feels a little weird. But so we provide funding. We've made 21 investments to date. 21 investments, some of them very early seed stage companies. So we've done $30,000 investments for 12% equity. We've also done growth stage companies. So our range is deliberately broad. It is in the $30,000 to $5 million in placements at the pump. And the reason it's so defocused, because most people want a particular stage, is when you look at the Philippine environment, there aren't very many funds. So we are wanting to cover off the entire range of developmental stages, because we understand that in many cases, the first round of institutional funding is not enough. So we do follow-on funding, we do growth stage, there's that. The other thing that most people aren't aware of is there are angel networks. So Phil Morrill of Pollinizer came in from Sydney to talk about what the Sydney Angels do over in Australia. What are the rules of engagement? So there is a Manila Angels, which gets people to volunteer to pitch, and they fund and they try and get, informally people to commit to funding a number of startups. There are also individual private angels who prefer to not join groups, who prefer to not publicize, but we know for a fact that they make investments. And some of them will make an investment of, $20,000 simply because, to Manny's point, this is the kind of company, and they'll say this, I don't know how you're going to make this back, but you are the kind of company that must survive. So I'm going to give you the cash and I'm going to have faith that you do it. So there is quite a lot of funding and very different types, very different characters, some very hands-on, some very hands-off. So I think that exists in the Philippines. And one of the reasons we do this monthly event, so Raid the Fridge isn't just because, obviously we like the beer and the company, but it is to help people meet everyone else and try and find the funding that's appropriate. So I hope that's helpful, good information. But go around, everybody, by the way, the people who are here for the first time, you've got to make 10 friends, 10 new friends. And some of them got to come from a range of communities. So we have Manny and Joanna. So are there other questions for Endeavor?
Can I beer? Can I beer?
Just one final comment, right? Since we were talking about public policy. So the president of Endeavor is a Mexican by the name of Fernando Fabre. He used to run Endeavor Mexico. And on the point of public policy, he once said something, along the lines of, public policy ain't gonna get you an ecosystem, right? What you have to do is you have to get, an entrepreneur like a Nick Nolieder or whoever, let them do their thing and get out of the way. That was his sort of summary assessment of what he needed to do. So let private enterprise do its thing.
Do you have any words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom. Well, one of the famous quotes from the founder, Linda Rodenberg, is, crazy is a compliment. So I urge you all to continue being crazy, dreaming crazy things, because sometimes the things that make the world better come from a crazy idea. Be crazy.